Good November to you. My name is Chaz Henry. I'm the founder of PowerChalk.com, and today's topic is teach your parents hitting. And what I'm not advocating is that you're drafting your parents onto your church softball league. Actually, that's not a bad idea, but maybe we'll cover that in a different webinar. What I'm advocating instead is born out of 12 years of Little League baseball coaching. So I've thrown buckets of baseballs to kids, and to be honest with you, in the past I've been a little bit neutral on particular mechanics. I mean, when you look at Kevin Euclid, you look at Craig Counsell, you look at different MLB players, you see a range of styles, you see all kinds of hitting techniques that lead you to believe that there's 10 different ways to hit. And what I've realized in my old age is that they're probably not. And I say that because all of the major leaguers have a few things that are in common. So what I really want to do is I want to focus on those common things. So to me, here's the reality of hitting. And the reality is that we got our teams about 4 weeks prior to our first game. And we had 2 practices per week, 1 hour per practice, so we got 2 total hours. I had 15 players. So I'll do some math for you here on the next slide. But here's part of the reality for me, the reality of hitting. And that is you cannot hit without good mechanics. Good mechanics and these common things that we'll talk about that all MLB players do are just a prerequisite for being a good hitter. The other thing that I think is a reality is that you don't get good mechanics in the batting cage. I mean, just like you do on the golf course, you just try to score. You make the shot that's going to score, whether or not it's technically the most proper shot or not. So here's some of the math. So those 2 hours equals 120 minutes. Divided by your 15 players, you get about 8 minutes. You're going to throw about 8 minutes of BP to each of your kids each week. And it's my premise that you cannot become a good hitter in 8 minutes and that you cannot teach your 15 kids to hit in those 4 weeks. The other thing I absolutely believe, and I have done a webinar on this, is you can't coach hitting during the games. I really ask my fellow coaches and all my parents, please do not coach mechanics in the game. It's too late. To me, there's play mode and there's practice mode. Whatever you've learned to do, you're going to do in those games. You really ought to just, use the game time to have fun doing that. So, while we'd like to turn all these kids into Tony Gwynn, the honest truth is I probably didn't do that in my 12 years. So looking back and having the experience of Power Chalk, here's my new premise. So here's the upside, and the positive message here is that you must teach your parents hitting. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm really advocating that we create a triangle of coach, player, and parent. And we get them on the bus. We start to talk mechanics for the first time. And we develop a common belief. And here's the reason. Nobody cares more. Nobody believes more in these kids. Nobody has more time and energy and influence over these kids than their parents. And for the coaches out there, you've seen this as well. All of my players, all of my parents believe their child is going to play Division I baseball. And I think it's fabulous to be that optimistic because, you and I both know, coaches, that, most, if not all of these kids never will play pro or Division I baseball. This is all about fun, but it's more fun to succeed. So I've really come up with a process. In this, what I've outlined here is a 5-step process to bring your parents into the hitting cycle and to create hitters who are as good as they can be. So it starts, like I said, with creating that triangle, the coach, player, parent. I think the other thing about doing this is you'll avoid some of the undermining that the parents do. I ask all of my parents to get involved. I ask all of my parents to bring their gloves. I've got another webinar on running a good practice, and it's all about creating stations and getting your parents involved. So I believe that's absolutely necessary. Now, what you won't find is you won't find a lot of mechanical knowledge. A lot of parents out there who know the swing. So that's what I'm advocating as step 2. You've got to learn the swing. And we devote some of our time. Now, what I can do, because I've only got the field for an hour, is I can put 30 minutes on the front or back of a practice, typically the back, and we'll go to a shelter, with picnic tables, and we'll talk about the swing. We'll learn what a good swing is, and we'll agree what a good swing is. And now, if you've heard my webinar about the talent code, And taking these mechanical movements, taking these motions and breaking them into pieces, then you'll understand that I'm on the third step here, advocating that we break the swing into pieces and practice those pieces in slow motion. So we'll talk more about this, but really all of these three steps are prerequisites to hitting baseballs. Now, in the good old days, you get your team, you bring them all together for the first time, and we immediately, I've only got 8 minutes with each kid. I want to make sure that one of my stations is the infield, and we're throwing live baseballs at these kids so they're getting their hacks in. So we hit baseballs. But if you notice, I say with good form, because if you don't do the top three things, you really don't have time to adjust those mechanics or to be practicing good mechanics in advance of hitting those baseballs. So my humble opinion, what I'm on my soapbox about is if you go hit those balls without good form, you're just grooving a bad swing. You're just practicing a bad mechanic that becomes part of your muscle memory. So how do you get to great mechanics? Well, I think you do it two ways. You film and analyze your swings, and you compare those swings to pro mechanics. And then, like I say here at the bottom, rinse and repeat. This really is an ongoing process. This is not something that you can do once and put these kids in the cage and they're taking perfect swings. For me in my golf game, it was about seeing it. I really didn't see on tape what I felt. So, one of the things I've heard said is what you feel is not real. So with that, let me switch gears here. I'm going to jump over into the PowerChalk Telestrator, and we're going to talk about, I think if you're going to deputize your parents, if you're going to challenge these parents to learn the swing with you, and let's all agree on what good mechanics are. I can't just stop there. I've got to give you, what I would consider hitting 101. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump over into the PowerChalk Telestrator, and I'm going to pull up Miguel Cabrera, and we're going to talk about some fundamentals. So here's the fundamentals. I believe there's there's rotational hitting out there, and for some, rotational hitting means no linear movement. And if you've seen my webinar with Jake Epstein, you'll find out that even Jake, whose dad Mike is the father of rotational hitting, is not espousing no linear movement. You've got to gain ground. You've got to move through the box linearly, and then you've got to convert that motion into rotation. So I've got some specifics in each step, and I'm going to load Miguel Cabrera, and I'm going to bring up those same specifics, and I'm going to show you that's exactly what Major League hitters do. So with that, let me turn on my text overlay and talk about hitting 101. So like I said, the first thing for me is that you gain ground. And while you gain ground, while you take that step, so let's take Miguel through his waggle here. Everybody's got a waggle. Again, if you're Craig Counsell, you've got the bat, as high as you can lift it. If you're Kevin Euclid, you're holding the bat, by 2 fingers up on the label. But everybody at the point where the swing starts, right there, needs to get into a load position. So now for Cabrera, what I say is as the front foot goes forward, the bat goes back. And that's exactly what you see right there. So front foot goes forward, bat goes back while he gains ground. And what I mean by gaining ground, let me get him back to here, and I'll draw a square on his head. And what I mean by that is he's moving through the box in a linear fashion. He's moving toward the pitcher. Now, the next step is that he gets loaded and the bat is tilted toward the pitcher. And that's almost the MLB logo. If you've noticed the MLB logo, the bat is tilted toward the pitcher. Now, why is that important? Let me say it this way, and this is something that Don Slott told me. He said, take your bat and lean it toward the pitcher, like we have here, and then swing it. You have to drop it into the slot to swing it. Now, if you were to take that same posture, but if you laid the bat back, and some of the kids do this, and you would argue you can still get in the slot, here's what I can do with the bat in that position. I can go ahead and move my hands, and I can drive that bat forward without really getting it into the slot. It's kind of laying it down. So enough about that. We can come back to that. But basically what I want to show you is that when that heel goes down, and this is part of hitting 101, we'll put the box back. When that heel goes down right there, if I draw another box, his head no longer moves. Okay? Now, I've done this on purpose. I've shown you a pitch that he did a take on. And part of the reason I want to show you is one of the other hitting 101 elements is that the hips, and Ted Williams was the first to say this, the hips lead the hands. So if you notice right there, he doesn't know if he's going to swing at this pitch or not, but his hips start to fire. You see that rotation right there. So his hips are starting to fire, and he's starting to rotate around, and he's going to bring the bat. He's going to bring his torso with him. He doesn't really fire the bat, if you will. He doesn't let go or release the bat. He instead starts his hips firing. And, of course, this is a pitch he chooses not to swing at, so the bat doesn't fire. But you notice what happened. The hips start always. The hips always fire. The bat may or may not release. Now, that's one of the things that video will show you with your kids. Some of the kids feel like, as I did with my golf swing, that my hip does lead the swing. It's really more evident on a take than it is on a swing. So you're going to see a lot of takes. You're going to film your kids, and you're going to see a lot of takes, and they'll just literally stand there motionless as that ball goes by. And what it means, they were never in a position to hit that ball. Okay? So the last piece, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to move Miguel here. I'm going to erase my markups here, and I'm going to move him to a swing that he does take. This is from the this year's All-Star game, by the way. All right? And this is a ball, I believe he drove this ball out of the park. I'm not sure. I don't know if this is the swing, but again, let's take him through and let's show the pieces, that I believe are part of hitting 101. The bat goes back as the leg goes forward. He gains ground. When the heel plants, he stops his linear movement and becomes rotational. Now, the other thing that I really want to point out here, and this is something that is an absolute must to get into your hitting regimen, to get all of the parents working toward with their kids, is notice the distance, if you will, between his bicep and that bat. All right? That distance is a constant, all the way up to about right here. So you see that bat starting to release right there. But he gets to a point where the bat is literally, I'm going to change to an arrow here, the bat knob is literally facing the pitcher, and it's level in the zone as he brings it through. And it's only at that point where the hands really start to release, where the arms and hands. Everything that's been done up until now is a result of the hips pulling the torso through. All right, so that is an absolute fundamental. We could scrub video all day and not find a major leaguer whose hips did not rotate, pull the bat through, and then the release, the hand release starts. And then the last thing I'll put on the must-have list is a extension of the arms, which you see right there. Fully extend these arms, and a high finish. And again, now here's where we get into, and there still are plenty of things to argue about, coaches. If you've got a certain philosophy, got a certain belief, about hitting, there's absolutely no reason you can't adjust this and pull, some of your do's and don'ts in as well. And what I mean by that is, here's the Charlie Lau. So Charlie Lau Sr. was the first who told George Brett that when you get to the point where you've made contact, which is right there, the ball on that frame right there is gone. Now my hands are still on the bat, but at that point, I'm not adding any extra power by keeping that top hand on the bat. So you see Miguel here let go. What it does is it lets him have a much fuller turn, much fuller finish. Again, I'm not putting that in as hitting 101. I think that's debatable. I mean, there's plenty of guys who roll over, but there's also in the MLB these days, probably about half of the guys who keep the bat on that same plane right through the zone, let it go with the top hand, and drive through it. Okay? So that's hitting 101. And again, I think that's important that we give our parents something specific. If we're going to challenge them, if we're going to deputize them to be our assistant hitting coach and to work with their kids on this, we've got to be working toward the same thing. And again, I would say that's gain ground. It's have the hips lead the swing, have the hips always firing, and then decide on the way. I mean, you saw how late he made his decision. The ball was literally in the frame of that video before he decided not to swing. But the hips have got to start. If they don't start, you're never in a position. I believe the swing has to be rotational. And again, there's linear movement, but the linear movement stops on heel down. And lastly, I believe you need to extend and have a high finish. And now, let me just flat out say, this is Hitting 101. This is not a master's course in hitting. There's plenty left to talk about, plenty left to debate. But I want to show you real quickly how might that apply to a real rec league hitter. So I've got one of my guys up here, and this is Jacob. And by the way, Jacob was a very good hitter. But I want to show you that while, and I'll just put him in motion here, while this is a hit, and a lot of us, as parents would have said, attaboy, attaboy, because he did whack this thing, and it might have even been in the gap. But just like me, hitting one down the middle in my golf game doesn't necessarily mean it was a good swing. So with that, let's go back and let's see how this holds up to the Hitting 101 that we talked about. So now, bat is going back, foot is going forward. So check. Good job on that. All right, and he's moving linear through the box. So let's start him out here. Let's say he's right there. And then at the point where the heel goes down, he's right there. All right? Now, a couple things that I'll show you that's not Hitting 101. And the first is, look at the distance between the bat and the bicep. And also look at his bat in that position is not really in that attitude, that angle that we talked about. All right? So what's happening is he's casting his hands. Now, you also notice that even though his heel is down, he's still sliding through the box. So instead of getting that leg out, that he can drive around it, and he can become completely rotational around that axis, he's still driving linear through the box. Now, he finally stops right there. All right? But again, that's well after the heel's down. So he's moved, if I go back to my line here, where we would have liked him to move from here to here, he's had additional movement from there to there. So it's almost like hitting the ball on the run. His eyes are moving, and he's continuing to slide through the box. Now, while he is, and I'll play this in slow. Now, you see that his hips are rotating. He's firing. That's pulling the torso around, but he's got the arms moving as well. And that's evidenced most by the distance, by this distance right here, this gap. And again, if you were to close that up and if you were to tighten the swing, I mean, when a skater rotates, they pull their arms inward so they can rotate faster. If he can get that bat in tighter to his chest and get that bat in an attitude more like we talked about, he's going to rotate faster. And that's really what I'm advocating, is let the rotation lead the swing. When he gets to right here, and he gets in a very good position right here, the position that we talked about, he's got the knob toward the pitcher. He does a lot of good things, but he also finishes low. He extends and finishes low. So again, this is a good swing. This is a great swing to work from. But if we could get the parents to help us add those elements, those Hitting 101 elements, this swing can turn into a great swing. So that's really what I'm advocating. Now, with our audio glitch, we're at the 25-minute mark. That's a little longer than I wanted before we take some questions. So why don't we do that? Why don't we go back to my summary page. And let me say, I hope this is a positive message, that what I'm advocating is that you don't have time to teach your kids hitting, especially at the rec league level, but you do have time to involve your parents in the process. And you want to make sure that you get them involved so these buckets of baseballs that you're throwing are not groovy to bad swing. Parents are the absolute key. Now we could do a whole webinar on drills that reinforce these Hitting 101 elements, and we probably should, but I think it's important to just get some fundamentals down, and for me, get the conversation going. I mean, it's all about the conversation. It's all about going back and forth where the parents are promoting exactly what you're promoting, and from there, what I think is, and if you've read the book about the talent code, you know that there's tennis academies out there that have kids practicing the forehand stroke in slow motion without even hitting tennis balls. So it is so important to get these kids to break the swing into pieces. That first move where the elbow stays in tight and the bat is still tight to the arm, that first move is so important. Get them doing that over and over. And lastly, I would say, get them to tell you why they're doing it. Once I know why, we're a how-to nation. We all know how to. The issue is why to. If they have a reason, if they have logic that goes with this motion that they're practicing over and over, one of the beauties of this, coaches, is this can be done in the living room with a wiffle ball bat. So the repetitive nature, the ingraining of this swing, this pro mechanic swing into their muscle memory can be done in the living room with a wiffle ball bat or a broomstick because it's in slow motion. Once you do that enough times, it starts to become your intuition. It starts to become your natural instinct, or what we tend to call muscle memory. So with that, let me open up for questions. I'm going to, like I said, we're running a little bit behind, so I'm going to take one, maybe two questions. Matt, first question. What specifically do I ask of my parents, and how much time can I tell them that it requires? Good question, Matt. With that, let me go back to one of my slides here and talk about the 5-step process. First of all, you know that you're not going to get 100% buy-in. You're not going to get all your parents to participate for whatever reasons. Part of the reason that they take them to baseball is, so you got them and they don't. But specifically, what I'd say is that you should ask them to watch this video. You should try to get them on the same page with these hitting basics, these what I call the 101 mechanics, and from there, ask them to start practicing these pro mechanics with their kids in slow motion. And like I said, since it's slow-mo, they can do it with a broomstick, they can do it with a wiffle ball bat, but I think they need to take at least 25, treat it as homework. Ask them to assign homework and to make sure they do it. We all do that with our kids. We ask them, have you done your homework? And, we try to put that on them so they get, take a responsible position on advancing this skill. And like I said, make sure that you have them break it into pieces, one piece at a time, the stride, the load, the hip turn, and don't move on. As a parent, what you can do, whether you're a baseball coach or not, you can look for these elements that we talked about and have them not move on to the next piece until they get the leading piece correct. With that, you'll be helping them groove a good swing. When you finally get them in the batting cage and you throw them their bucket of balls, they're going to be repeating a pro motion swing and grooving a good swing instead of me on the driving range grooving a bad swing. So let me take one more question from Tim. Should every kid have a tee at home with soft-like balls? Absolutely. One of the things I've learned about Tony Gwynn is Tony did hours of tee work. While some pros think, well, you need to hit live baseballs, Tony did hours and hours of tee work. And Tony was notorious for going to the opposite field, and he would very often set that tee deep in the box and make sure that his theory was that if he could handle a pitch deep, he could handle anything. It's very easy to get out in front and drive a ball and pull a ball. It's much tougher, to fight off a pitch that got deep on you, and he felt if you could handle the deep pitch. So I think with, again, practicing mechanics, whether it's a tee or whether it's live pitching, you got to make sure that you're making those first initial moves correctly. Because like any sports motion, if you get off to a bad start, your swing, your pitch, your punch, your kick becomes a series of compensations that is meant to overcome the bad start that you got. So with that, I apologize for not being able to take more questions. We've reached our 30-minute mark. I want to tell you that this and all of the webinars we do will be on the website, getbetterfaster.tv. So I'd encourage you to tell your fellow coaches, your fellow parents, to get involved in this process. Go to getbetterfaster.tv, and up in the right-hand corner, you see the subscribe button. They can subscribe and get on the same page with us. So with that, thanks for tuning in. I'm Chaz Henry, and I appreciate your time.